watching NotesIn9.
Hello, and welcome to Hello, and welcome to NotesIn9. I'm David Leedy. Episode 140, SourceTree Deep Dive. Just Git with the flow. Okay, today we welcome back Paul Withers. Paul is a consultant for Intech Systems, which is a consultancy out there in the UK. His Twitter is Paul S. Withers. He's got a website at Jason Medea, which he does some writing on Greek mythology and stories like that. He's an IBM champion and a regular speaker at various Notes events all around the world, really. He did speak once or twice at IBM Connect last year. Some very good sessions. He's not just an OpenNTF contributor now. I should update the slide. I believe he's also on the board and stuff like that. So he's big into OpenNTF and I think the OpenNTF API project, and he does mentoring and all around just X Pages expert kind of stuff. So today he's going to come on with basically a piece of the IBM Connect session he did with Declan Lynch, but he's going to expand on. So it's really not the same thing because quite honestly they ran out of time. But he's going to do kind of like a deep dive into SourceTree and using Git flow for your work. And this is kind of similar to what I do at the day job, and we do, though we use HGFlow, but it's pretty much the same thing, just because we use Mercurial instead of Git. It does take a little bit to get into using SourceFlow or some of these source control tools, but in the long run, it is worth it. Though again, don't underestimate the effort and be prepared for some problems. Russ Mayer has had more than his fair share of problems, and quite honestly, I've been in a slump lately myself. Though I think I'm pulling myself out of that. So just you do have to be careful with it, but when used properly, that your code is protected because it's in the different branches, and that history is always going to be there. But you can, when you're using it, you can make different branches for features and hot fixes and releases, and it's a good way to live. But like everything, just be careful. So with all that being said, here's the demo.
Hello, my name's Paul Withers, and I'm going to cover in this session using SourceTree and particularly using Git flow to manage source control with an NSF. Now, this is really an extended version of what I didn't manage to cover in the show and tell at IBM Connect, and it's a good chance for me to actually go into a bit more detail than I would have done in the session. So first of all, I've got a slide here which we showed in the session, which I think is critical to actually understanding source control, because when people talk about source control, it's this umbrella concept. But when you're talking about source control with an NSF, or even source control with just flat files and a remote repository, there's much more going on than that. And it's important to understand what's going on in order to identify why things aren't working, or where to go and get help when things aren't working the way that you're expecting them to. So the first element is synchronization between an NSF and an on-disk project, and that's solely Domino. That's using DXL round tripping to take NSF design elements and convert them to flat files. Then you've got your local source control repository. And one of the good things about using source control that's outside of Domino Designer is that you can actually store more than just the on-disk project in that repository. Indeed, you can store multiple on-disk projects in a single repository, and that's great for if you've got a multi-database application. You can also store additional files, so documentation files, potentially. And although I haven't tried it, you could export all of your keywords, for example, or any of those kind of environmental specific documents, and store those in your repository, so that wherever you are, you can actually get those particular files. So then you've got something that actually manages branches within that repository, and that's in the topics in the versions that we're going to be covering here. That's either Git or Mercurial. That handles merging branches. That handles committing changes. So if there's a problem with merging two branches, that's going to be something specific to the source control language that you're using, either Mercurial or Git. And then you've got some kind of external or remote holder for those repositories. That can be on premises, so the ones that we covered were Stash and Redmine, or they can be up in the cloud, so something like Bitbucket or GitHub. If you don't have any on-premise source control repository set up, any source control management system set up, then I'd certainly, and you don't want to use, if for some reason you don't want to use a cloud offering like Bitbucket or GitHub, maybe there are security issues about pushing files up there, and if you want to use an on-premises solution and you don't have one yet, then I'd strongly recommend that you go and look at the slides up on my blog for the session that we did. I deliberately wanted to cover installing source control management systems on premise, because I think that's one big area where companies, one big reason why companies aren't using source control. It's something that as a developer you may want to use source control, but you need to get an admin involved in setting it up. If they're not familiar with Linux, then as we had, then actually setting up Redmine can be complex. There are some configuration settings that need changing, and Declan covered those particularly well in his part of the session. But if you prefer Windows, if you've got a small team and you don't mind a small outlay, then Stash and Jira are a very good option. That's the one that I use, and it was very easy to set up, and there's extensive documentation if you do need any help around that. So we've got the source control management system, so Stash, Redmine, Bitbucket or GitHub. You can also have issue tracking around that. Now some of them, like Bitbucket, GitHub and Redmine, have issue tracking built in. For Stash, and you can also use it also for Bitbucket. Atlassian, who do Stash and Bitbucket, have a tool called Jira, which is very good for issue tracking and also allows you to track time, estimated time for a feature or a fix, actual time, target dates, and most of those issue tracking tools and also the source control management systems have REST services to allow you to pull that information down. So there's the potential there for actually interfacing that in with Xpages. So those are the particular moving parts there. The DXL round tripping here, Git or Mercurial for handling commits, and your source control management system. So if you've got a problem pushing up to your source control management system, then have a look at the help for that particular source control management system. If you've got a problem merging, then have a look at the help for Git or Mercurial, depending on what type your repository is. If you've got a problem with pulling files back into an NSF where it's not working as you expect it to, then that's going to be an issue around DXL round tripping. So that's a Domino specific issue. It's not going to be different if you use a different source control solution, because the problem is the pushing out and the pulling in of that DXL to flat files. So let's go ahead with actually creating a repository. So I'll call it show 103. You can add a description. I'm going to make it a Git repository, and I'm going to add issue tracking and a wiki. And the good thing about Bitbucket, which is what I'm using for this demo, is that it has Xpages as a language. If you look at the slides from the show and tell, I was actually using Stash for that, but I want to use Bitbucket here just that you can see the difference, and that really the only difference is what you're looking at here up on the browser. So I'm starting from scratch, so I need to get the URL to pull down that repository. So here it is, and if you've got a Git repository, then it's always going to end .git. If you've got a Mercurial one, it's always going to end .hg. So I'll now come across to SourceTree. Now SourceTree is a graphical user interface for managing your local repositories for Git and Mercurial. And I don't know about other Domino developers, but I don't particularly like command line interfaces. You've got to learn all the commands. There isn't really great help for in there for remembering what the commands are. You've got to get the right folders. This kind of graphical user interface is much easier for me. If you do want to use the graphical, if you do want to use a command line option, then you've got a link to the terminal there, and we will use that for a little bit later on. The other good thing about SourceTree, and I only came across it when I was preparing for the session, is that you can actually group your repositories in folders. So we'll create a new folder called Connect 2014, and we'll create our new repository within that. So we just paste in the URL, and it tells us that that's a Git repository. It recognizes that, and then we can create a destination path for the local copy of that repository. So I tend to put all of my repositories in a Git repositories folder, and this IBM Connect folder is the next level down. And I'm going to create a folder called Show 103, and I'm going to select that as the destination path. And then we can give the local repository a name within SourceTree. If you're just using the Clone New button, then here is where you can select the folder that you want to put it in. And we'll clone that. It tells us you appear to have cloned an empty repository. That's correct. So that's just a warning, that's not a problem. And here, if you want to move to using a command line interface, here you get all the command that it's actually running. We get a green bar here to show that it's been successful. If it hasn't, then you get an orange bar. And we've created the file. So now I'm going to go to that folder, and you see we've got a .git folder in there, which is just how Git manages everything. I'm not going to put any other content at that level. It may cause problems if you do. I deliberately want all my NSFs, all my on-disk projects rather, at a different level, so I'll create a notes folder. If I was adding multiple on-disk projects, I'd create multiple folders under that notes folder, one for each on-disk project. Now I also want to add in a documentation folder. So this is typically where I put any documentation, so Java docs, data models, those kind of things. And I'm also going to pick up something called a readme.md. Now this is just a markdown file, MD, and markdown is just a basic language for text editing. So we've got a hash for a large title, 2 hashes for the next level title down, hyphens for bullets, and there's a link there to where to actually get more information on Markdown. And there's also the link in the slides. Now the reason for having that Markdown file is because, as we'll see shortly, that can actually, a readme.md will often get picked up by your source control management system and used as the kind of home page. So now if we come to our local repository, we're in the working copy area, then we can see that README file there. We don't see the folders because there's nothing in them, so there's nothing to actually push up. So at this point we can stage selected files or all files. So we'll stage all the files and commit. So no NSF at this point. And we can choose to push those commits directly up, or just leave them just in our local repository. So we've got the local master branch here. We've got nothing up on Bitbucket. If I want to push that up, then I can choose to push just that up. So I'll push that up to Bitbucket, and now we've got a branch up on Bitbucket. And if I come across here, I'll just take a copy of that for later. Then you see we have that README file there. We have the link across, and so you can add some rudimentary documentation for actually where to go to pull that information down. If I go across to the source tab, then we see we've got the master branch there. If I go across to commits, then I can see that commit was pushed up a minute ago. Branches, there isn't any branching there, but I've also got links to issues and wiki because I set those up. Over here then we've got a link to the administration area. You notice the wiki also uses Markdown, and that's where the link came from. So it's and you can actually do that editing of the wiki locally and push it up. It's just in a subfolder called wiki. So that's set up our source control repository and pushed it up to our remote source control management system. Now I'm going to initialize Git flow on the repository. Now Git flow sounds very complex for a start, but it's not. It's really just two main branches: your master, which is the production code, and develop, which is your development code. That means that if at any point you notice there's a problem with the master branch, or you need to make a hotfix to it, then you can create a hotfix again from this git flow button, and that will take a copy of the master branch, create it as a hotfix branch. You can make your changes there, test them, and then close the hotfix, and that will push them into the develop branch and also the master branch. So that means that you're not making changes on a template that you pushed up and having to make those same changes onto your development template. You're making them once and pushing them to both branches automatically. Similarly with features, you can create separate feature branches. Each developer can work on their own feature, not impacted by others, not impacted by any build processes that are happening just as they're testing, so that they lose any Java objects, for example. You can each work on your own feature and work independently, test those, and then push them back into the develop branch. And then the develop branch is where you would then do your final QA before creating a release branch. And a release branch will take a copy of develop, create it as a release. You can add in any release notes at that point, finish the release, and that will automatically push it into the master branch. So you're getting a lot of functionality there that's very easy to set up just by clicking on the Git flow button and creating the relevant type of branch. So it sounds quite complex, and you can end up with some quite complex routing maps, but it just means that you can work on individual features separately. So we'll initialize that. And it creates a develop branch and automatically pushes us onto that develop branch. So we can then push that up. I'm going to push master as well, even though there haven't been any changes. So that's now pushed up the develop and the master branch up onto our remote source control management system. And if we come across here to the source branch, now we can see we've got those two branches. So now I'm going to add an NSF into that branch. So I've got my NSF here. It's not got source control set up for it, so we can go ahead and set up source control for this application. Now again, that's a bit of a misnomer. We're not setting up source control for this application. We're creating an on-disk project which can then be used for source control. So we'll call it show 103 ODP. We don't want to switch to the navigator view, and we don't want to use the default location. We've already got a local repository set up. We want to create the on-disk project into that repository. So we'll go and select that. So we'll go to users, withers p, my Git repositories folder, something at the top. Under Git repositories, and it's under IBM Connect. and I want to create it into that notes folder. Now it's important that when you're creating the OnDis project, you create it to a blank folder. I made the mistake a couple of times when I was starting off with source control of creating my OnDis project into my Git repositories folder. Don't, because it basically deletes everything from that folder and exports the NSF as flat files into that folder. So it basically got rid of all of my Git repositories. Again, not a critical problem because I could go and clone them down again. It was just annoying. So it's important always to select a blank folder. And it exports all those files. And if we come across the notes folder, now we've got them all there. If we come across to SourceTree and click on the working copy, then we can see those sitting in the working copy changes. From looking at David Leady's video on source control when he did the installation of SourceTree, it looks like if a Mercurial repository doesn't have these two windows, which I quite like, because you can see what hasn't been staged yet in the bottom window and what has been staged up in the top window. You've also got various options for showing conflicts, untracked files, ignored files, clean files, modified, and all. Now there's one other step that I'm going to do here, and that is using I'm going to initialize Dora for that repository. Now Dora is a great project by Cameron Gregor. It's up on OpenNTF, or you can download it as a repository from GitHub, which is what I've done here. And once you've downloaded it, you need to basically run this install Perl script. So you need to open the repository and go to the terminal and type /install.pl. Everything's installed here already. It shows that status, but if it wasn't, the first time you want to use it, you do need to install it first. So you go to the installation submenu, install everything, and it's going to warn me because I've already got it installed. But you just select yes to everything and enter to continue. You only need to do that the first time. Because I'd already got it installed, I didn't actually need to do that, but I went through it just to show you. Then you go across the, so that's installed Dora. You now need to Dora enable your repository. So go across to that particular repository, select the terminal and type Dora. And nothing's installed at the moment. So we select one to install something, one to install everything, and then select yes for each of the types of files. And now you see we've got this git ignore file and a git attributes file. Git ignore file is basically telling it to ignore some files like the XSP design.properties, the .classpath file, the plugin.xml, and it's also got an XSL style sheet folder that has a style sheet, some style sheets to basically automatically ignore some things like last access property on a view. So when you open a view, it won't pick it up as a change. It still picks up changes on metadata files, but it certainly cuts down the amount of unnecessary changes that it would otherwise pick up. So I'm now going to commit those. Now you notice that I didn't stage the changes first. From the commit dialog you can also stage them. So that pushes them all up into the stage changes area. It's got a plus sign for files that were added. It'll have a minus sign for files that were removed. Question mark will appear in the bottom area for files that are new, that haven't been staged yet. And so we'll commit that. So we've added the on this project and Dora, and from here we can automatically push that directly up. And let's push them up. So let's push them up to the develop branch. So if I come across here and look at the source, then on the master branch it's still just got that readme. If I switch to the develop branch, it's got everything. So I now need to get that develop up into master because I'm ready to make my first release. So I go to the Git flow button and start a new release, and we'll call it 0.5, and it's based upon the latest development branch. And we create that release. So it creates this release folder. Now you don't necessarily need to push that up, but I'm just going to push it up so that we can keep seeing that up in our remote source control management system. Otherwise it's only going to exist locally, and once I complete the release it will remove the folder from my local, and there'll be no record of it up in the remote. But I do want a record of it up in the remote, so I'll push it, and now we can see that it's up there as well. Now at this point, if there were any release files that you wanted to add it in, any release notes, then you would do so. There aren't, so I'll just finish that release, and we'll choose to delete the branch. We could have added a tag, but the tag is really the version number that's in the release, so I don't need to. So it's now removed that local release branch. It's merged it into the master. There weren't any changes in develop because the release was created from develop, but we've got some changes in our master that need pushing up. So we'll push everything up. And we've got everything up there. So now if I come across here and switch to the master, that's got everything in there. And if I want to go back at a later date and check what was in the release, then I can have a look at that. Now, issue tracking. I mentioned Jira, and that's what you'll see in the slides for the show and tell, but Bitbucket has a cut down version of Jira built in, and GitHub also has issue tracking. Now, issue tracking is again a bit of a misnomer. It's not just issues. It's also enhancements, tasks, proposals. So we're going to create an enhancement called contacts page. We could add a description, assign it to a user. I'm going to assign it directly to me, give it a priority, add in attachments. So if you've got some kind of documentation of what was actually required, then you can upload that there. And we'll just create the issue. And we've got the issue there as issue number 1. Now, I'm not going to be, although it's saying that I'm working on that, I'm going to work on that as a secondary developer. So I'm going to switch across to my VM, and I'm going to clone that repository. So I'm going to paste in the URL that I had earlier. If you've set up Bitbucket and links to Bitbucket or Stash or GitHub, then you can use this globe icon here and actually go and choose the repository from those. For Stash, just bear in mind that whereas in Bitbucket and GitHub, you create repositories at the top level. Stash and Redmine, you create projects, and then within those projects, repositories. If you're using Stash, then you need to go off to your account and add any new projects in. Tick those so that they're selected, otherwise you won't see the repositories under those projects. It doesn't by default select new projects. But I've just pasted the URL in there for ease. I'm going to go with the default here and go with the default for the name for the repository, and I'm just going to keep it at the top level. There's a preference for whether or not it shows the full output. Under Tools Options, we've got this option for whereabouts is it for? There's an option on one of these tabs for showing the full showing all of the details. It's probably going to be on here. I can't see it at the moment, but always display full console output. So that will show you the full display, which is what we saw on my main PC there. And you can also set it to automatically push to the remote source control repository when committing. So I've got the remote area there, and we're seeing the release, the master, and the develop. Now I want to set up Git flow for that. I want to have the develop branch there. I want to be able to create remotes and features and everything. So I'll just initialize Git flow on my local repository. And I've now got my develop branch there. So I'm going to be working on that feature. So I'll create a new feature called context page. And just as the release created release branch under a release folder, so the feature creates a feature under the feature folder. So we've got everything there. So now it's time to pull it into Designer. So I'll import existing project into the workspace and navigate to that folder. Now I don't want to copy it into the workspace. I don't want to take a copy of that local repository and put it in the workspace folder of Domino Designer. I want to be working directly on that local repository. And so now I associate that with a new NSF. So I'll select my server and we'll call it show_103.nsf. Now at this point it's creating the NSF, which takes a few moments, and then importing all the files in. And now I have a fully functional Xpages application. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that feature. So I'm going to create an X page called Contacts, and I'm going to pull in Layout Custom Control and add the main nav in there. Now I also need to add in contacts as a page on there, so I'll go to the main nav custom control, just copy that page tree node, call it contacts, map it to contacts.xsp, and set the selection property, which is the string to map if I want to make this page as selected to contacts. Now that's being used on my with the navigation path control property on the layout, so I'll set that to /contacts. Just double check that I got the /contacts. And now I'm just going to add in a data view into the main facet. So I'll select the contacts view and just check the columns so it's full name and email. So my summary column I'll add with the column name full name, and extra columns I'll add with the column name of email. So assuming that I'd gone through and tested that, I'll then sync that back to the OnDisk project, and in the working copy here, there we can see that modified custom control. We can see what's been added to it. We can see that with the green means it's been added, and it's got the plus sign there, so that line has been added. Contacts, everything is new because it's got this question mark. There it's got the ... for modified. Now the other very important thing is preferences in Domino Designer. Now under Domino Designer and Source Control, I've got nothing ticked here. I don't want binary DXL. If it's binary DXL, then things like forms and views get pushed out just as blob data, so it makes it very difficult to actually manage merge conflicts outside of Domino Designer. The only way to manage those merge conflicts is to go to the two branches, pull the two copies of the design elements into an NSF and compare them side by side, which isn't particularly easy. At least with binary DXL deselected, you can actually look at them and for a large proportion of it actually see readable data. I also disable automatic import and export from the NSF, so as you saw there, I was right clicking and syncing with the OnDisk project. That just means that if anything modifies, if anything on those files gets updated in any way outside of Domino Designer, then it's not going to affect my NSF until I want to push anything out. it means that there isn't any risk of my NSF getting overwritten accidentally. There are cases where it may be a fair amount of time since I last synced, and I've made lots of changes. At that point in time, just for safety, I often refresh it down onto a test database, or take a local copy of the NSF just in case, before syncing. The other settings are under General Workspace, and I always have Build Automatically switched off, and I also have Refresh Automatically switched off. Refresh Automatically only works if Build Automatically is switched on, otherwise it has no effect whatsoever. But Refresh Automatically basically would mean that this on-disk project, Designer would automatically refresh it. Now, I take the approach similar to the whole situation of antivirus scanning your data folder. If you've got two programs both competing for the same file, both trying to refresh the same file, I think it's a recipe for disaster, so I have it switched off. It does mean that if you make any changes, then you need to go to right click and refresh, and then right click team development and sync with on-disk project. It does make it manual, but to be honest, as with Build Automatically switched off, it becomes muscle memory. So we've now got those changes in there. I'll now push those up and commit those changes. Now, also in Bitbucket here, we've got the issue reference for Jira. Then issues again are under a project, so they'll have that project reference in there. Here on Bitbucket, it's just #1. But if you include that in the commit message, then something really nice happens. Once we commit that, and actually if we go to our commits, then we've got a dynamic link here across, and just hovering on it tells us what the issue is. Clicking on it takes us to that issue, and we can mark that as resolved. So at any point we can go and see which change set was involved in that issue. From the commits there we can see it, and it's now struck through because it's showing that it's resolved. So that's creating that feature. If I come across here and I'll just close down SourceTree and start it up again, just so that it refreshes with what's up on the remote repository. Perhaps we'll need to refresh remote status. Let's try that. Yes. So now refreshing that remote status, now we see that that feature's up there. At this point, I don't want to pull it in. We can actually also see the details here. The develop branch, it's up to here. There's the feature that goes further, and the master is branched off of the initial commit. But what I've noticed is that main nav here has got homes defined. Now what that means is that if I just show that page, it means that home is, that's from last time round. If I just build that again, yes, but you see that home is not selected, so I actually need to fix that. So I'll come across here and I'll create a hotfix. Now hotfixes are based upon the master branch, so I'll call it homepage, and that creates that hotfix under a hotfix folder. Again, I'll push that up to the remote just so that I've got the full history up there. And I'll now come across to Designer, and here's that on this project. I'll just refresh that and sync with the OnDisk project. So that's pulled in that new branch. Sometimes when you do that, you might see that Designer, the NSF sees a conflict, and you just have to choose between the OnDisk project or the NSF. Usually it's either when you're syncing down from, so the OnDisk project is the one that you want, or syncing up, at which point the NSF is the one that you want. The other very important thing is particularly on that Domino Designer source control tab, that all developers have the same settings on the binary DXL, because otherwise one person will be pushing those traditional design elements out as binary DXL, one will be pushing them out as non-binary DXL, and it's a recipe for all sorts of problems. So I'll come in and just modify that and build the project, and now when I refresh, now it's showing up as selected. So I can come across here. Oh, it soon becomes muscle memory. I need to sync that off to the OnDisk project, and then come across here, and I can see that that X page is there. It shows me the change. Metadata files also get shown as having been changed. Untitled view seems to show up as being changed. That doesn't seem to get excluded by Dora, but really most live production NSFs won't have that untitled view in there. So we'll just commit those, stage those and commit them. And we'll push that up. And then the next step is we've done that, we've made the change, we've tested it. Now we need to finish the hotfix, and at this point it will push the hotfix into the master branch and into the develop branch. So we'll finish that hotfix. It's merging it into the develop branch, and also it's a switch to the master branch, merging it in, switching to the develop branch, merging it in, and deleting that hotfix branch. So it's doing a lot of stuff that we don't need to do. So Git flow is extremely useful from that point of view. And then we just need to push the changes in the develop and the master branch up to the remote repository. And they're there. So if we look at all of those commits, now we're seeing quite a complex, or what looks to be quite a complex map. The green here is the develop branch. This one I think is the, oh no, that's the develop branch, because we can see merging into the develop branch there. This one is obviously the master. This is the feature, which has been completed but not done anything with yet. Here is the hotfix, which was pulled off of that release and then merged back into the master there and merged back into the develop there. Again, in SourceTree, we've also got that same navigation. So we can see that this is the blue is develop there, that's gone through its life cycle there. From this point in develop, we've created the feature. From this point, or up from this point here, we've also been that's been merged into point 5, which is also the master branch. The hotfix has been created from there. Oh, sorry, this is the hotfix there. That has then been merged into the master branch and merged back into develop. So it looks quite complex, but just look for the colours in the description column here to actually see which branch is which. So I'm now going to switch back and just refresh that repository, and I can see that I've actually got some changes here, which my local repository is behind the remote repository. So I just need to pull those down. So I'll just select the pull button. No, it's important to pull into the correct branch, so we just need to switch to master and pull from the origin of master back into my local master, and do the same for develop. And now I can switch back to my feature branch. There's nothing there. Now the Git flow button here is just going to give me the option of finishing the feature. Say I wanted to go off and develop another feature. Well, I just switch to the develop branch, Git flow, and then I can create a new feature from there. You're just getting Git flow actions based upon the current branch. But I just actually want to just finish this feature. Now this is going to finish that feature and merge it back into the develop branch. And at this point it tells me there are merge conflicts. Now this is the point where normally you would think, oh my God, what am I going to do? What do I have to do with this? And if we were to just open that file up, and I'll just use Notepad, then this is what you would normally see. So you just get a text file, text editing. This head bit is what's in the remote repository, so in the develop branch, and this is what's in the feature branch, and you've got to manually move all of that around, and remember to get rid of these lines for the head and for the feature. It's an absolute nightmare. So that's why I use an external merge tool, and the one I use is Perforce P4 Merge, which is free, and the slides show about how to install it. It's very straightforward. You just then need to, in the options here on the diff tab, you need to select that as the external diff tool or merge tool. Diff allows you to look back at previous commits. So look back to previous commits, right click and on an option and look at it with an external diff and see the difference between the file at that commit point and what you've currently got. So it's very useful for easily seeing differences, but here we're using it to resolve the conflicts. Now, sometimes it's straightforward. Sometimes you just want to use the one in your current branch, or you just want to use the one in the remote branch. Here it's slightly more complex, so we're going to launch the external merge tool. It tells us that it's in progress, and it launches the remote tool. This looks quite terrifyingly complex for a start, but the key is to just look at what's in capital letters here. The blue one is local, so that's the current branch that you're on. So at the moment we're merging it into develop, so the current branch that we're on is develop. Here we've got remote, so that's remote. That's the feature branch that we're pulling into develop. And base is a common ancestor. Now, the great thing about Perforce P4 Merge is that it will, as much as possible, make a guess, and if there's something that's in local that's not in the other two, it will select that. If there's something that's in the remote that's not in the other two, it will select that. Here it can't select because we've actually changed adjacent lines. So we can see that the base just had homes. In the develop branch, it's been changed to home, but in the feature branch it's still homes. So home is the one that we want. It's been changed for a reason. If in doubt, you can go and look at the commit, see who committed it, ask them, check what the change was for, if you can't actually see it from the commit message, and follow up before you complete the merge. We can't actually select that line from there, because if we select the blue, then the new line, the new link to the contacts page is gone. So we'll select that one, but you can go in and edit this main area. So that's what we want. We want home in there, and we want the contacts line added. So that's completed our changing for it. Save. If there are additional changes, then you can navigate to the next change and to the previous one. You can undo if you do something accidentally. But there I've completed all my modifications. Save it, close it, and it completes it. It does leave a .orig file in here, which is the original file before I did the external merging. I don't want that, so we'll just remove that. And to complete the merge, if you're doing a merge, then you might think that you need to click the merge button again. No, the merge is completed. We just need to commit it. So commit it, and it automatically pops in that message of merging the feature branch into develop, and we'll push that. So that's taken a feature where we had a conflict, and it's dealt with it. So if I come across here, it also then shows up in yellow that there were merge conflicts in there. It's merged the feature branch back into develop. If I go across to the source and switch to the develop branch, then under notes, under X pages, I can see that we've got that contacts page in there. If I go to the custom control and the main nav, I can see that we've got home.xsp and contacts in there. Also, incidentally, one of the benefits of it actually pushing up that metadata file is that metadata file didn't have a conflict in it, so it's actually showing the commit message for that relates to, which actually is the hotfix one there. And the other messages here are actually those files haven't been changed since the commit that had message added ODP and Dora. So we can track that back to they haven't been changed since here. So we get a lot of information there that looks quite complex for a start, but actually becomes extremely useful. Just a couple of other points here. We can go back to any particular commit and see what the file was at that point. So here, that main nav, we can see that's what it was at that point. I can use that external diff that I mentioned, and usually that should that original file may not exist on my local, but that should allow you to compare those files. Pull we used to pull down, push we've used to push up. You can manually branch, you can manually merge. So you can also cherry pick particular features and pull them into the current working copy. If you do get files in your working copy that you don't want, then you can use this stash button. So you stage, I think you stage them first, then you use the stash button, and it creates an area under stash so that you don't lose those changes, but you can go ahead and do a merge without actually pushing up a commit. And then you can pull them in at a later date, or if they're not needed, for example, if you've got metadata files there that you didn't want to commit, then you could just stash them and just forget about that change. If you want to get back to see what the database was like at a particular point, so say we wanted to have a look at what the database was like when this release was created, but we don't want to, but we can't use the master branch, we can't use the develop branch, and if for some reason we haven't got a remote version of it, then what we can do is reset the current branch to this commit. So we can reset it to that point. And that gives you options of soft, mixed and hard. Mixed will keep any changes in your working copy. Usually you'll just want the hard one. You'll want to force it right back to that point. The other thing to bear in mind is with your working copy changes here aren't branch specific. So if you switch from, if we had some changes here in the working copy, and we're currently on the develop branch, but we switch to the master branch, then those working copy changes are then they're still showing in the working copies. So then they're actually working copies on the master branch. They're no longer working copies on the develop branch. So that's something just to bear in mind as you're flicking between branches if you've got any working copy changes. We can push them up, pull them down from staged. There's a lot of flexibility there. And as we showed, we've got the terminal there to handle if you want to use Git commands or HG commands. So that's pretty much covered everything from SourceTree, and certainly in a lot more detail than I could have managed in the show and tell. But hopefully that will give you plenty of confidence to actually work with source control and source control management.
And that's the demo. I thank Paul for coming on the show. It was great to have him back. And here's my contact information, and I thank you for your time.